don't know if I still have to whisper. I don't know. It feels like 100 years since I've done this. So welcome, everybody, to CASAA Live. Thank you for joining Alex and I today. I see a bunch of familiar faces out in chat, though. Wow, Ern, Tom, Tia, Nick, Michael, Mark. Thank you, everybody in chat who's with us today. We have a fun, I think, timely topic right now, giving a whole lot of things going on. But I also know right out of the gate, we do have some kind of legislative heads up things happening. So, Alex, would you like to just take in?
Would I like to just, you cut out there and I think you're frozen.
Oh, did I? Oh, legislative things
legislative
that we have going on.
So, well, I think this will set up our topic pretty well, because we are going to get into, I think, you know, broadly the players in the advocacy space here, and who we are identifying as, you know, the opponents, and who everybody is sort of going up against. But really quickly, this maybe not be very quickly. It is the beginning of the 2023-24 legislative session. And so we've already seen, I guess, about a half a dozen or more bills coming through the wire. Special thanks to Lindsey Stroud at the Taxpayers Protection Alliance for being on top of all of this stuff and catching some of this stuff before our tracking system even found it. So without getting too long-winded here, here are some states that everybody needs to, you know, if you live in Connecticut, Indiana, New Hampshire, North Dakota, Washington, and maybe West Virginia, this will be relevant to you. Of course, relevant to everybody, because some of these bills get copy pasted into all the other states. So right off the bat, we actually do have a committee hearing coming up in North Dakota next week. This is on the 17th, and that is Tuesday, and that will be at 8:30 a.m. North Dakota time. Is North Dakota Mountain or Central?
Oh, you're asking the wrong guy.
I am definitely asking the wrong person.
I literally tell everyone for the middle of the country to just figure it out every week that we would do this.
So apparently both of us are not good at figuring out where Central Time ends.
Yeah,
and
unless you live on a coast, I can't help you.
Yeah, but so whatever, 8:30 in the morning, North Dakota time, this committee hearing will begin. This is HB 1357, and we'll have links to some of this stuff in the notes. And this one may also get a call to action. But this would prohibit direct-to-consumer shipping of tobacco products, essentially remote sales. I know that within the community there are sort of some different views on these types of bills, but from our perspective, adults who are losing access to vapor products but could still buy them online, we need that. We want people to be able to buy these products. So that will be January 17th, 8:30 a.m. in the House Industry, Business, and Labor Committee, room 327C. And if you want to submit written testimony or sign up to speak, again, you'll be able to get there through the link that we'll post. You need to do that before January 17th, 7:30 a.m. So have your testimony and your request to speak in an hour before. Thank you, Nick, for clearing this up.
Like right and wrong all at the same time.
So unfortunately, I just took all this information off the legislature's website, and they didn't specify. So I guess you just have to know. If you're in North Dakota, you apparently know whether this is Central or Mountain Time. Or I guess it's wherever the state house is located, which I'll figure that out before we put anything else about this out there. So anyway, North Dakota looking at a ban potentially on direct-to-consumer shipping of vapor products, tobacco products, etc. And then we'll just get back in here sort of in alphabetical order. Connecticut, a bill has been introduced, HB 5381. This would be a flavor ban and a nicotine cap. The cap would be set at 35 milligrams per milliliter. CASAA is opposed to both of these proposals. Indiana is looking at HB 1214. I think I had some problems with my brain on figuring this one out. It's a tobacco and e-liquids modifies the definition of tobacco product to include a product that contains nicotine and is not approved by the Federal Food and Drug Administration for tobacco cessation. Provides that an e-liquid distributor shall purchase and distribute e-liquid from an Indiana e-liquid manufacturer or Indiana e-liquid distributor. I think everything except for I guess you can, I don't know. Some of this sounds like it might get into the interstate commerce clause, but restricting people to purchase tobacco products from an in-state distributor is actually pretty common, as I understand it. So anyway, that's happening in Indiana, which has a history of introducing not just bad, but corrupt legislation. So we'll be keeping an eye on that one. New Hampshire has an interesting one, and I'm not sure where this will go, but to give you maybe an idea of the state of things up here in New England, New Hampshire is looking at a bill, and this language confuses me as well, but I think basically it would grant authority to the commissioner to annually set and publish the tax rate for tobacco and nicotine products. Tax rates shall be a maximum of the lowest rate charged for equivalent products in Massachusetts, Maine, and Vermont, taking into account any secondary or sales tax, and a minimum of 8% below the lowest such rates. So I'm not quite sure. To me, this sounds like New Hampshire is codifying, undercutting all of its neighbors in terms of taxes and selling tobacco products.
Yeah.
Which, of course, New Hampshire was one of the biggest beneficiaries of Massachusetts' flavor ban and menthol ban.
Sure.
So it seems like they are looking to solidify that and enshrine it in their state code. And the next,
live free or die and take money from your neighbors.
There you go.
That's on the New Hampshire state board.
If you can fit that on the license plate, go ahead. Washington has SB 5239, and this I think I probably should have made more notes on this one because the description is very vague. An act relating to protecting public health and safety by enhancing the regulation of vapor products and tobacco products. I suspect that has something to do with banning flavors and perhaps more restrictions on retail sales, and who knows. I should know because I should open up the bill and read it, but this may not. Let's see, we got an original bill here. I'm not going to make you sit here and listen to me figure out what this is all about, but we will likely have something up about this. All of this to say, I almost forgot West Virginia. This is the Washington bill is this is upon determination by the secretary that a characterizing flavor may be harmful or pose a significant risk to public health, the secretary may prohibit the characterizing flavor in cigarette and other tobacco products. Pretty vague, and looks like the state sort of making an attempt here to swoop in and take over some of FDA's jurisdiction, which would be product standards. West Virginia, just to round out the list, word is that West Virginia is moving on tax reform. And whenever we see proposals for tax reform doing away with certain taxes, tobacco is where people kind of end up to make up those differences in revenue. Not sure how popular any proposal to add extra taxes on cigarettes or other tobacco products is going to be in West Virginia. Just to say, if you're in West Virginia, keep your eyes peeled and your ear to the ground. This may become an issue. Not a lot of confidence right now, but just know that we're all kind of watching what's going on there. So I included this because, first of all, these are bills that are introduced and there's more to come. I think a bulk of states sort of come online in the beginning of February. So over the next 2 or 3 weeks, we expect to be seeing more legislation introduced. But I figure this was probably a good way to introduce some of what we're talking about here, because legislation is where all the magic happens. And just this pro tip from Stephen Allen Adams, who is a journalist, government watcher, reporter in West Virginia, provided this helpful pro tip on Twitter earlier. or yesterday. Tip for the public and new state house watchers: focus less on the bills that are introduced and more on the bills that make committee agendas. A lot of craziness gets introduced. Most never see a committee agenda. We have a lot of that here in New York. People may know the name Linda Rosenthal. She tends to introduce a handful of anti-vaping legislation every year. And there's really no guarantee that it goes. It all sounds really horrible, but a lot of times it doesn't go anywhere, and it'll come back introduced by someone else. And they keep introducing the same bills over and over again. It may even get a committee assignment, but it doesn't necessarily move anywhere. So all of that really to sort of hopefully assuage some people's anxiety about a lot of the horrible stuff that we're going to see over the next month. Most of it won't go anywhere. But the stuff that does, we want to make sure that we're ready and focused on driving engagement to stop, or in the off chance, support something. Sure. That is
just in my short tenure here with CASAA, the amount of bills that I've seen introduced that we've had quick discussions on that have just sat on someone's desk, or they get tossed out or whatever, and we never have to do anything for them, is quite a lot. It's quite a lot.
Yeah. So
before we move too much further along, is there a chance that you could possibly share links to all of those things with Kristen, so that way she can kind of get them out to the masses?
I did.
I know I'm throwing a curveball right in the middle of the show here.
Chris, the link to to this document with all the links to all the bills is in our private Skype chat, and so Kristen will have access to all of that and can put all of that in the notes.
Perfect.
Or just awesome. Kind of drop them in the comments as we go if you like. So we've got all that going on, and are we going to run the bumper for the?
Yeah, Hi, I'm new here. I missed the first bumper. Kristen already yelled at me about it. So yeah, if we're through with legislative stuff for now, then I think we're ready to, I guess, explain if big tobacco is the biggest threat to vaping. You ready? All right, Alex. Is big tobacco the biggest threat to vaping? And by big tobacco, I think most people know that we're talking about incumbent tobacco companies.
Yeah. We are talking about the incumbent tobacco companies, but this gets a little bit more complicated because we are sort of now talking about the top 5 vapor manufacturers by market share, which includes incumbent tobacco companies. So you can go to the FDA's website and look at the list of all the products that have been authorized, and a lot of the things that we expect to see starting in this session and moving forward until the regulations are kind of rejiggered to be more appropriate. A lot of this stuff is going to feel like all of those companies are against the independent vapor industry. So I figured we'd start with some background here. I did kind of skip ahead because we're not quite at what is big tobacco's stake in vaping. But just to kind of set the table here, we have seen legislative efforts spearheaded by tobacco companies in the past, and a lot of that has taken the form of small per milliliter taxes. Those of you who've been around for a while may remember Reynolds was actually pretty well known for shopping around a 5 cent per milliliter tax. I believe they were behind the 5 cent per mil tax in North Carolina. I don't have a running list of all of the states, but they're mostly southern states. I do remember having an opportunity to speak with somebody from Reynolds at an event in Chicago once when the Kansas tax bill was running away from everybody. What originally started as a small per milliliter tax quickly ballooned into something like 20 cents per milliliter, and it was out of control, and it just took everybody by surprise I think because not many of us knew about it until it became a huge issue. And then I actually had the opportunity to speak to somebody from the company and say, hey, you guys kind of screwed everybody in Kansas. What were you thinking? Here's a state that is poor because they lowered taxes and have huge budget deficits. So, where was the calculation that said that they weren't going to go crazy with this tax bill? And that was, I think, probably the best example of a small per milliliter tax running away from the people running the bill and turning into something huge. So we haven't seen too much of that recently. And taxes seem to have become less of a threat year over year. Right now, the big things are going to be flavor bans. And a flavor ban was something that we saw, and it was absolutely a misstep by a company that's pretty good at making missteps. Juul actually ran a flavor ban bill in Florida, and were reaching out to their customers saying, "Hey, support this flavor ban." I had since spoken to somebody with Juul and received at least a one-on-one kind of apology. It was again a misstep, and we had some of this in the early days. I remember, Enjoy had their government relations team who we knew and were friendly with, and they were, knowledgeable and supportive of the independent vapor industry. But whereas they would be going out, educating people about the products and about what appropriate policies were, I think the like executives of the company weren't really on the same page and started saying things publicly about banning flavors and so on.
Sure.
And so there was this disconnect between the higher ups at the company and the people who are actually on the ground in state houses. But that was something that was ultimately resolved. And so there are a lot of missteps going on within just the vapor companies. But these things do hopefully get ironed out before they turn into policy. Another legislative effort that we see pretty regularly, we've been seeing this for a few years now, is preemption. And essentially, this is prohibiting local regulation of tobacco and nicotine products. And a lot of this, I think we've seen in regards to, or it kind of got its start in preempting indoor smoking laws. But now, it's even more important because municipalities are moving on banning flavors or adding their own taxes if they're able to do that. And I know that I've referenced this several times. Carl Phillips has and I'm having a hard time finding it recently, but Carl had written a blog post on his blog, Anti-THR Lies, talking about why he, as an outspoken liberal, is actually in favor of not just state preemption, but federal preemption of tobacco regulations. Public health laws do best when they are implemented at the highest level of government. You have, some of this homogenization across the country, rather than having to deal with this patchwork of regulations where people can hop over the border and get something new. So preemption, as far as regulations on low risk products, is something that CASAA supports. We don't want to see a patchwork of regulation across states. It actually creates more problems than it solves. And so that's kind of where we're at. I had a little note here on what is floor versus ceiling preemption, but I think I'm running a little bit long, so I'll skip some stuff here. Floor being minimum regulations, ceiling being a maximum. And so kind of what we're looking at, the best example is the Tobacco Control Act. It sets a ceiling on what states and municipalities can do, which is that little quip about Washington's bill that may be reaching into product standards. Product standards is the jurisdiction of FDA.
Sure.
States and municipalities can do sales and regulate retailers, but they can't get into the manufacture of products. And so all of that's going to be relevant going forward. The final piece of legislation that we're going to see more of is the PMTA exemption. So think New York's flavor ban as a model for what we'll see this year. I think we're expecting this in about half a dozen states, and we'll see if that actually happens. And yes, so some people may be suspecting, and I'm going to confirm here, this is being run by a tobacco company. It may be supported by more than one, but I don't know that all of them are supportive of this. And so this is where it gets kind of murky, and where we're getting into answering the question of, did I get it? Did I get it right?
Who is the biggest threat? Is that the question? Where?
Oh.
No.
Boom.
I don't know what's happening. There we go.
What is big tobacco's stake in vaping? And the answer to all of this is that incumbent tobacco companies now do have a stake in vaping. And so in order to protect their products and protect their attempt at sort of rebranding themselves, tobacco companies are going to have to go. It's not just going through the motions, but they're going to have to get in line with FDA regulations. And we all know that FDA does not have the human power to enforce PMTA on all of the companies, all of the shops, all over the country. And so what FDA does is they usually partner with state and local health departments or health authorities. And part of that, FDA isn't a lobbying organization, but the campaigns can pick up the torch there and lobby for bills like a PMTA exemption bill. Or just banning flavors, which is probably what they'll go for, because apparently even after a generation of lobbying for FDA to take control of tobacco products, they don't like the way FDA is doing it. FDA is not banning things hard enough, and so they're taking this fight to states and municipalities. So it's a difficult situation, because in some cases a PMTA exemption is probably going to be the best that any of us are going to get. We're going to be out lobbied by tobacco companies and out lobbied by the campaigns. And so we just sort of end up getting, whatever they can argue the best for. So I swear to God, I'm going to keep breaths. I promise you. So I think we've pretty well, established tobacco companies do have products that are authorized for sale, and part of keeping their products on the market will be defending their brand and defending, or preventing illegal sales, illicit sales, and going after people in the underground market, all of those things. And that means lobbying in support of laws that will grant states more authority to police the industry. And this is something that is expected of them. This is not unique to tobacco. This is across all industries. If you are a big company and you're making these products and you're profiting off of this, you are expected to pull up some of the slack in enforcement. And all of the major tobacco companies have divisions that deal with illicit trade. Probably some of the best reporting and best data on the illicit tobacco market comes from tobacco companies. And so this is just something that's expected. People at tobacco don't wake up every morning and are just like, I'm going to screw the little guy here. It's not really how this works. That might be how business works, certainly. But in terms of what everybody wants out of lower risk products on the market, this is really just something that's expected of the companies that have seen authorizations. So all of this to say, should be obvious at this point that tobacco companies are invested in this category. They have their own brands out there. They want to get their own brands on the market. And they're also kind of, promoting themselves as being a solution to the problem of smoking that they created. So we see, Philip Morris has their own sort of smoke-free future campaigns. Also, Philip Morris funded the Foundation for Smoke-Free World, which a lot of the antis are sort of referring to as a big PR campaign. But at the end of the day, it's real money, and it's going to real research that can really help the rest of us. And so for anybody who's kind of poo-pooing foundation money, I understand that there's some consternation. There are some issues with the way that money is being handed out. I don't have all the details, certainly that money, a lot of money, could be used faster and more effectively. But this is, it's in the hands of people who I think do see the vision here. And regardless of whether or not it's coming from a tobacco money, that money is going into research that can be helpful. Reynolds also has its own smoke-free portfolio, whether we're talking about Camel Snooze or Views. And I don't know if Reynolds has a nicotine pouch. Do you know, Logan? They do. It's Velo.
I don't want to say yes or no right now. My inkling is yes. I believe they do. I just can't remember who it is.
I don't know what it is. Am I going to get like taken out by the YouTube gods if I flash a product on the screen? I probably shouldn't. So anyway,
I mean, I sit here and vape on a product, but I don't show.
We don't have QR codes or URLs.
Yeah, no. I'm pretty sure yes, but I mean, I only use one brand of pouch, and it's not a pouch that's put out by Reynolds. So I want to say yes, but I'm not.
I'm sure they do. I had a little brain fart there. Velo, I believe.
Aren't there? Never mind.
There's Velo and Epoch and
Velo. That's what I was. That's what I was thinking of, but I wasn't. I didn't want to throw the name out there, and I couldn't remember if that was Reynolds or not.
Yeah, Velo. Is my mic not on?
No, it is.
Okay, sorry. So Velo and Epoch, I think, was bought out by Reynolds. Anyway, actually, Epoch made a really great black licorice nicotine pouch that I liked for a long time.
You're one of the black licorice folks. I can't
use for some reason. So,
that's like not actual black licorice. Yeah, I can't do blac licorice.
No, it's flavored. It's flavored nicotine pouches, and they're black. They're pretty good, but they changed the recipe, and it's not great anymore. Anyway, and I'm seeing Lucy nicotine pouches. Apparently, that's interesting. The nicotine gum company. So anyway.
Yeah, I have so many things I want to say about that company that I'm just not going to.
Yeah, we'll not do that. I swear
gonna do that.
I am gonna make this go a little bit more efficiently. So anyway, it should be clear to people by now that tobacco companies do have a stake in all of this financially. They have product lines. They have entire smoke-free portfolios that should be promoted, and I'm sure to many people's dismay, CASAA supports that. One of the things that we've been saying for many, many years is, if we are truly interested in quickly deploying a harm reduction strategy and having these products accessible to as many people who smoke as possible, tobacco companies are in the best position to do that. There are a lot of things that they need to do. For example, when you walk into your convenience store and you see that what's called the power wall behind the cash register, and you'll see a row of, just Marlboros taking up 6 slots on that wall. Well, tobacco companies need to change that and have just one for Marlboro. How about we have most of the space occupied by smoke-free products? When I go down up the street to the gas station near me, about a third of the display is for smokeless products. And I've seen, I think Zyn has kind of crept in where the cigarettes are. And these are things, that kind of marketing is what we want to see from tobacco companies. And they're in the best position to do it because they've got all the contracts with the retailers. And so they can make their smoke-free portfolio more prominent to people who smoke. And so they are invested in this, and they should be supporting policies that keep these products accessible to consumers, people like you and me who used to smoke or don't want to smoke anymore. Unfortunately,
I will say the power wall has been getting better in the last few years as far as seeing kind of that space growing of smoke-free products, nicotine pouches, or what vapor products are still available. But yeah, I agree. I'd like to see like a whole 180. 2/3 of that shelf, that space, should be smoke-free products. Where as now, or at least for a long time, what smoke-free products you would find outside of the section of just loose oral tobacco would be like down in the bottom corner. You're not even going to see the pouches or like Enjoys or something like that or whatever, until you got up to pay for the thing you already told the cashier you wanted. Like, you're not even going to see those products until you've already said, hey, can I get a pack of Marb 100s? And then you're like, oh, what's that? Oh, I'll buy it. Maybe I'll check it out later, not today. Like, we kind of need to reverse that. We need to put eyes right front and center on those products instead.
Yeah. So that may be happening slowly, and CASAA supports that, and we hope to see more of it going forward. To kind of round out this section, first of all, I should have said this at the beginning. The only reason why tobacco companies can sell vapor products is because of the independent vaping industry / vaping community who built all of this. This should just be like, this is kind of one of those things that should be a disclosure at the top of any time we discuss like what tobacco companies' stake is in this industry. The reason they are able to have a stake in this is because all of us got together, fed up with nicotine replacement therapies, fed up with all the other therapies and treatments and 1-800-QUIT lines and all that stuff, and also not getting really the products and innovation that we as consumers want from tobacco companies. And so people said, we're just going to do this on our own. And all of this happened on ECF. It all happened on social media. It happened in people's homes. It happened in, tiny little conference centers, in crappy little hotels, people coming together for vape meets and sharing their recipes and having fun and quitting smoking. That's why all of this is here. And all of you out there who started all of this deserve all of the credit for any of the good that comes from this. And so it's as is typical, in the business world. It's usually the larger fish that come along, gobble up the technology, gobble up the innovation, and start making all of the profits. And in the case of tobacco, they're able to do that relatively easily. It's not easy, but it's relatively easy because of the Tobacco Control Act. So right off the bat, if we wanted a simple answer for who the biggest enemy of vaping and tobacco harm reduction is, it's Congress. It's Congress and campaigns. They're the ones that wrote the law. Tobacco companies at the time, of course, saw an opportunity to insulate themselves from competition. That's a business decision, but not really an enemy of the category. So hopefully that, I think, makes some sense. And all in all, I think one of the things to point out here is that this shift in focus from what products tobacco companies are going to be selling is being, the antis are trying to brand this as essentially an empty public relations campaign. And that was some of the arguments against Foundation for Smoke-Free World and any movement that a tobacco company makes toward promoting smoke-free products. It's the note I have here is incumbent tobacco companies are routinely called out as trying to whitewash, for lack of a better term, their past by pivoting to sales of smoke-free products or otherwise supporting some anti-tobacco legislation, think minimum sales age, marketing restrictions, and so on. Which in some cases, I think it was the CEO of PMI, I think was on Sky News or something a couple of years ago, talking about being grilled on the fact that PMI and other companies are still marketing to young people in some countries that don't have robust marketing restrictions. And the response was, well, then those countries need to pass laws limiting marketing, because the companies apparently can't just decide to stop marketing things on their own, because there's another company, their competitor will swoop in and gobble up that market share. And then the shareholders will just fire the board and get some people in there who will market. And so it is one of those situations where more laws have to be passed in order to level the playing field. And I think that's several people have commented on this. Clive Bates has spoken out about it, why this is not going to happen. And I'm sure Carl and Chris Snowden and other folks have commented on this. So I'll refer you to their comments on that. But all of this to say, tobacco companies absolutely have a stake in this industry, and they do want things to succeed. And as I mentioned before, it was the independent folks who innovated these products and popularized them and actually gave tobacco companies kind of the green light to get into the market.
Which we should note wasn't until years into vaping's existence
Right.
that any tobacco companies entered this space. It
Right.
was what 2013, 2014 before we saw really any introduction from tobacco companies. Up until then, it was just the independent vapor space.
I don't know when Mark 10 came out, and I'm not totally clear. It's
I
one of
want to
those
say
things,
it's like
perhaps.
2013. Either way, it was
Yeah,
years. It was years
20,
down the road before, and like you said, this was an industry from the ground up, built by consumers, reviewers, folks online, consumers. Like there was no involvement out of the gate for years from
yeah,
tobacco companies. And we hear all the time, that vaping is just a big ploy by tobacco companies and all of this and that. Well, without that historical context, I mean, it can't be a ploy by tobacco companies if they weren't the ones who started this.
Right. Yeah. The narrative doesn't fit the timeline. And part of the reason for this is that, incumbent tobacco companies are just, they're massive corporations and they are under the scrutiny of federal regulators. So they were not really in a position to go take a chance on a bunch of vapor products. And so it wasn't until I think the independent vapor industry started chipping away at their market share, not necessarily, alarming, but noticeable. And of course, this has been confirmed by not necessarily an economic look at things, but the Progressive Policy Institute released their report showing that 60 to 80% of the increased decline in smoking is attributable to the availability of vapor products between 2014 and 2017, I think were the years that they looked at. And so that does send a message
the
to
golden era.
Yeah, the golden era. So anyway, all of that to say, tobacco companies have a stake in this and they're not out to just crush the market. I
was just going to say, if incumbent tobacco companies, big tobacco companies involved in the vapor space are not our biggest enemy, I wouldn't necessarily be, inclined to say they're our buddies, our best pals, they're always on our side. But if they are not our biggest enemy, then who is? Because it's really easy to point at the evil big tobacco companies that sell the number one, product that kills people. It's so easy to just say they're our biggest enemy. But if they're not, then who is? And there's nuance to this answer, I believe.
Yeah, and there's some history here. You're right. It is very easy to point to the boogeyman that we've all kind of accepted. Tobacco companies are guilty of some extreme evil, and they've acknowledged that, and they've been held accountable for that. They continue being held accountable for it. And now they're in a position they can't get away with anything. Just by way of example, when I have any correspondence with somebody at a tobacco company, the rule is know that anything you write in an email, anything in writing between you and someone at a tobacco company, there is a high probability that will end up in front of a judge and it will be public information. So if people think that tobacco companies are getting away with the same stuff they got away with in the 50s and 60s, it's completely wrong. We have a law about this.
Under a microscope.
There is a lot of enforced transparency here. And so it's important to think very critically about the messages we're getting from all of the public health campaigns. And these are the organizations that are putting up the most resistance to any form of harm reduction related to nicotine. And the history here is, and I don't really have a piece of writing or an article or anything to link to. I hope it's out there somewhere, and I don't want to be the only one who believes this, but back in the early 80s, tobacco control actually did have an opportunity to sort of inform the public about the continuum of risk within tobacco products. Brad Radu would actually probably be the best to speak on kind of the history of research on smokeless tobacco, but it should have been apparent through epidemiology or, just, looking at the numbers, which is kind of epidemiology, that, people who use smokeless tobacco were not experiencing the same early death and disease, at least not at the same rate as people who smoke. And so the idea that you could switch from a cigarette to a smokeless tobacco product, even in the 80s, was something that I think was known. And so it was so known that when Skoal released a campaign that was, the message was take a pinch instead of a puff, all of the anti-groups jumped all over them and said, you're making a modified risk claim. That was the language, that they were making a modified risk claim about their products, and you can't do that. So it was known that the continuum of risk was a real thing back in the 80s, but instead of promoting a harm reduction strategy, all of the campaigns, so we're talking American Lung Association, American Cancer Society, American Medical Association, American Heart Association, World Health Organization, American Academy of Pediatrics, all of these organizations decided to take more of a zero tolerance approach. And that's where we get the message that there is no safe tobacco product. Let's be really clear. I don't think there's any safe municipal drinking water, but we need it. And there are ways to reduce your exposure to chemicals in your drinking water. And so,
yeah, I think the idea of absolute safety from any product, thing, activity, whatever it is that you do, is just nonsense.
Right.
And it's, I think that's tough for a lot of people to grasp. And it's easy to think like, oh, this thing is safe. No, it's not. It does. Complete and utter absolute safety doesn't exist. That's not a thing. Everything we do, every activity, the foods we eat, like the water we drink, carries risk. It depends on proportionate to what? Proportionate to the alternative. What is that risk assessment? But yeah, the idea of like, well, yeah, there is no safe tobacco product. That's one of those. Like, yeah, that's a fact with no nuance, no explanation, no regard for anything else. It's a blatant carpet like fact that's easy to throw out there, but it doesn't really explain anything.
I'm not comparing water to vaping. We're talking about safe. The concept of safe. For those listening, that was a comment from Maureen. Just to clarify, no, I'm not comparing vaping to water, but it is this concept of relative risk. Thank you, Ern. Safety is a relative term. Absolute safety is an impossible bar, and I don't think there is no product on the market that meets those criteria. And so it's straight up propaganda. And I kind of lost. It's all the organizations and this impossible bar of absolute safety. And of course, the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids has been around for a while. I think they have gone through several name changes, and I apologize for kind of screwing this up. But eventually, it became what we now know as the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids in the wake of Master Settlement Agreement and the Tobacco Control Act. And their mission, of course, is to lobby in favor of CDC best practices for implementing the Tobacco Control Act and improving public health, or whatever the fine print is on their website or wherever their mission statement is. And all of these groups, of course, are well funded, which we get to next. And I highlighted some things here. Anyway, all of this has been going on since 2009, in regard to vaping. One of the first things, I had the opportunity to read one of CASAA's early calls to action. I think it was 2010, and it was a flavor ban in New York. And it's actually really kind of interesting to see that, our position and the language that we use to promote this call to action hasn't changed. It's the same issues over and over again. And it went all the way back to 2010, long before we had the supersized mods, or people are chucking clouds at fire or at smoke detectors.
2000? Did we even have ego batteries in 2010?
Yeah, I don't know. It's before I was still smoking menthols, so I don't know.
Oh yeah, I was chain smoking Camel filters in 2010.
Yeah. So hopefully that sort of I think outlines who is really opposed to vaping, and then of course the next question is why are they so against us? And I actually kind of skipped ahead here. and that was, talking about what happened in the early 80s with Skoal and going after them for making a modified risk claim, which is objectively really just a Coke versus Pepsi kind of marketing tagline. But they are against vaping because it's a tobacco product. It's nicotine, and this does get even more nuanced. And I think one of the things is, I think what people have been inclined to do is sort of compare tobacco companies to Hitler, which is sort of the go-to. Like, if you need a bad guy, that's kind of the easiest bad guy to point to. But it would be like allowing Nazi Germany to profit off of rebuilding Berlin or something. And it's just, for a lot of people, not just tobacco control activists, that's unacceptable. And so the idea for a lot of people that tobacco companies would profit in any way off of selling low risk products is absolutely abhorrent to them. And so they have chosen this path of pretty much zero tolerance. Which part of it is a consequence of the law, and the other part of it is just a consequence of their very narrow-minded ideology. So I think that checks a lot of the. There are several answers to why, but to oversimplify it and boil it down, it really comes down to ideology. And I think a lot of people have their blinders on when it comes to talking about this as a drug policy issue. We are having conversations about decriminalizing and legalizing all drugs, hopefully, and regulating the marketplace so that people have access to safe supply. They have more access to treatment if they come to that point in their experience that they need that and they want that. They can approach these situations without feeling stigmatized. It's less dangerous for people. It's more welcoming for people, and we can improve public health by bringing people in instead of pushing them out into the shadows. And those things apply for tobacco products as well. And so it's our hope that, by continuing to do what we do, continuing to have all of you, speak out about this, that we can change some of those opinions slowly but surely. We just need to be persistent. And so I hope I've answered the why do they oppose vaping question. I don't know. Did you have anything to add to that? I'm trying to keep our time down here.
No. I mean, really, I personally just think a lot of it just comes down to ideology. I mean, and you can look at this in any in any drug space, whether we're talking about cannabis or opioids or something like that. Regardless of how much science backs harm reduction measures, from the late 70s on, there are groups who will oppose that zero tolerance policy, that no amount of this is safe. This idea that somebody could freely go use a drug that has been regulated by the government is just absurd, unless you're in some form of medical setting, unless a doctor has given it to you or whatever. I mean, this goes back hundreds of years. We've been doing this, through temperance. And I mean, in different parts of China at one point, it was people were murdered in the street by their government for using drugs or what have you, or even smoking tobacco. So yeah, I think the ideology, the prohibitionist ideology, that temperance ideology, is just something so ingrained in humanity that really, and then from there we just get campaigns and groups that pop up from these folks. I think that right there really is the biggest enemy in my eyes, as far as not pointing the finger at one particular group or another, but that mindset, that ideology, that driving force is really the biggest enemy.
So that kind of dovetails into the next question, which is
who benefits?
Who benefits? So it's really
from banning safer products, Alex.
Well, it's a tremendous fundraising tagline here. So that's why we've seen youth use numbers sort of blown out of proportion. And I know we've got some comments about kids getting interested in this. And I'm not here to deny the fact that young people are using these products. And I've certainly heard from some people who describe how I understand young people can quickly habituate quickly progress to habitual use of vapor products. The fact that these products are discreet and easy to use is probably the most significant reason, not necessarily the marketing, not necessarily the flavors, but how easy it is to use these products constantly throughout the day. It's not something that we had
And
with
sure,
cigarettes when
habitual
I was a kid,
use.
but that is an issue. And yes, I am talking about habitual use, not addiction, because we're not going to blow this out of proportion like all the campaigns. But to answer the question,
But I mean, I was just going to say, is habitual use is really one of the biggest driving factors in any dependence or addiction. The idea of, you know, one hit and you're hooked for your life, regardless of what the drug is utter nonsense and
right.
not backed by any evidence ever. It's the repetitive and habitual use that leads people into a dependence, or, you know, possibly an addiction, depending on the substance and whatnot. But yeah, that's it. I mean, so if you have ease of access, then yeah, you know, that there's a higher chance that you're going to get these products more and then use these products more, whatever the product may be.
So to hopefully quickly answer this question, I'm going to refer everyone to a very long but worth the read article from Michelle Minton, who we've had on here. Fear Profiteers, How E-Cigarette Panic Benefits Health Advocates. So the beneficiaries of all of this anti-vaping propaganda and the people who are putting out the anti-vaping propaganda are all of the campaigns that we mentioned in the previous section. They are getting cut in. There is some government grants funding some of this stuff. And there's, of course, private money. Most notably, Michael Bloomberg has pumped $160 million. I think that it was a 3-year period. So I think that's kind of come to a close. It was 2019. I think it was 2019 or 2020 when he made that announcement. I remember seeing him on CBS Morning News. He basically adapted some like nonsense talking point about smoking cannabis lowering your IQ. He took that and applied it to nicotine vaping. In both instances,
oh yeah, it was like oh god.
And of course, he's sitting on a panel. He's being interviewed by the folks at CBS Morning News, and Matt Myers is sitting next to him, and absolutely nobody questioned him on it. So thanks for, I don't know, being journalist or something. So this really gets into this, and I think one of the phrases that I picked out of here is fighting for this money like jackals over a carcass. So in one of the things that Michelle mentioned, I can't remember if it was this article or another one, was this sort of health charity government agency alliances. One of the things that is really supposed to be a hurdle is that ideologues who find themselves in government aren't supposed to be able to lobby in favor of certain policies. That is illegal. But funding somehow can, work its way after being washed in the blood of Jesus somewhere to these campaigns, and then they will pick up the mantle and they will lobby federal, state, and local governments to implement policies supporting all of the anti stuff that we see going on. Now that we've got Michael Bloomberg in the mix, one of the numbers that I think has been shared around is I think he outspent tobacco companies 2-1 on the California initiative, and of course the initiative passed. I'm glad that he spent all that money because he doesn't have it anymore, and that initiative would have passed without his help because California is pretty anti-tobacco. And I don't think anybody needed to take out a single billboard in favor of that proposition. So I'm sure that all of that really just raised a bunch of money for all the campaigns anyway. But that's really what this comes down to, is that with the advent of vapor products and the larger discussion about reduced risk products, these groups are, I think, starting to feel their irrelevance, and so they've had to sort of trump up a new boogeyman. Which is it's the same boogeyman, it's tobacco companies, but they've had to lie and twist the truth and make it sound like tobacco companies invented all of this stuff just to hook your kids. And everybody here listening, hopefully everybody, knows that that is not true. But it's not going to stop these campaigns from fundraising all of the sensational nonsense that they put out there. We've also seen examples of politicians being funded. I think one of the things that Michelle points out in her article here is that health officials in other countries have found themselves being completely paid for by Bloomberg money or other organizations' monies, in pursuit of passing stricter laws on vaping or tobacco products. And this all basically smacks of corruption. And I really wish I had, for anybody who doesn't know Marc Guther or hasn't read any of his stuff, he's done some extensive reporting on this issue with regard to Michael Bloomberg and the Truth Initiative. And so definitely check out both Michelle's work on this and Marc Guther's work on this for some more in-depth detail. But to simply answer the question here and move along, it is the self-appointed public health campaigns that benefit the most from this. Not your kids, not us. It's the campaigns, and they have got.
Yeah, it's such a big shame to see this, in a lot of these middle and low income countries too, because it's they're dangling all this desperately needed money in front of them that they can use for all sorts of things, whether it's in their health sectors or infrastructure or what have you. All of this money that these countries need is being dangled in front of them, and they're basically these are the stipulations that come along with this money is these tobacco policies and things. And it's one of those things where, like, can you blame a country necessarily for taking that on or not? I almost don't. I think this falls back onto the hands of Bloomberg and these campaigns that dangle this money in front of them.
Yeah, it's a lot of it, and yeah, it's just really this uncreative approach to things. It's a very Old Testament way of dealing with things,
sure.
And it is just not consistent with the contemporary movement of I think reevaluating how we approach drug regulation and drug policy and improving public health.
It's just anti-science. I mean, that's it's anti.
It is, and we've seen this behavior from the regulator. So now we have a director at the Center for Tobacco Products, Brian King, who seems to be willfully complicit in advancing the political agenda of the campaigns that obviously have his ear. He'll do a Q&A with the PAVE Moms and Truth Initiative, but won't take 30 seconds to answer a question at the Global Tobacco and Nicotine Forum. In fact, he was whisked away by handlers, and Guy Bentley had to chase him down in the parking lot to try to get an answer out of him for something. And so it is very clear where his allegiances lie, and motivations there may be to advance in his career, and it's certainly not to protect the public health. There's Brian King for you. So we've got who benefits most from the bans, and I'm about to run over time, but we've kind of answered where do they get their funding, but there's some more background here. The Master Settlement Agreement provided some funding for the campaigns. It was supposed to go, a bulk of those funds were supposed to go into tobacco prevention and education stuff. And I think Kristen has wrote some notes here. Out of the billions of dollars that has been collected through the Master Settlement Agreement and dispersed to states, 700 million. That's it. That's all that's been spent on tobacco control measures. So one of the things that I'm fond of including in some of our written testimony is if the state believes that these interventions are worthwhile, then they should be fully funded, which most states do not. And this is another thing. I'll keep dropping Lindsey Stroud's name, but she is a diligent researcher in all of this. And her 50 states analysis, looking at what the state laws are and how they're funded, if they're funded at all, is an excellent thing to look up. Taxpayers Protection Alliance. Definitely check it out and follow her on Twitter. If you're not following her on Twitter, or even if you can't stand Twitter anymore, definitely follow her, and she'll post those links from time to time. Anytime we see a bill come up, usually a link to her work will come up as well, and that gives you all the information you need to know about how much states are not actually funding any tobacco control measures. So let's see, we had the $160 million that Bloomberg has put up over 3 years. We got over the 47 million that he spent in California. That's 47 million compared to 25 million by tobacco companies, which I think was largely Reynolds. And yeah, it's sort of that's not the only money that he's contributed. He will fund some of the small local or state efforts out of his own pocket to deal with some of that stuff. So I got my $700 million wrong. Sorry about all of that. But we also had Johnson & Johnson is in on this as well. They, I think, provided kind of the seed money, the endowment for Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, or was it Truth Initiative? Sorry, I should really have all of this stuff committed to memory, but there's only so much room up here. So the funding is coming not just from tax revenue or government sources or grants, but it's coming from funding from a pharmaceutical giant and Michael Bloomberg, who it just apparently has an axe to grind with anything that isn't Snow White and pure. So I think is that the end of my slides here.
Yeah, so, no nicotine and no big sodas for you.
Yeah, exactly. So I hope we've kind of addressed some of what folks are, as you mentioned, it is really easy to sort of point the finger at tobacco companies. And, for most people, that is the most obvious villain here, because they do have the most to gain. And I had actually recently heard that producing vapor products actually has a higher profit margin now than cigarettes. So they are motivated to gobble up as much of the market as they can. And unfortunately, these are the perils of business. This is what we would expect to see in any industry. As long as that's the way of the world, that's what we're going to see. But tobacco companies don't actually have there's no benefit to them in crushing the entire category. And if anything, they should want to protect the little guy, because that's where all the innovation and progress is going to come from. That's where it all did come from. Of course, they're going to run it through their own labs and their own development process and come up with something that, is sort of homogenized and probably a little bit lamer, verifiably lamer than what you'll get in a vape shop. But that's how, we've got cars. That's how. That's why it's designs in cars and safety and environmental and all this stuff is slow to progress and all of these things, because they gobble up the technology, they put it into their product, and there's this sort of slow forced obsolescence over time, and they milk every last dollar out of all of those products to recoup their investment in developing these things. Tobacco companies don't really want to crush us. If anything, they end up kind of being our biggest ally in a lot of these fights. But that's not to say that we don't find ourselves on opposite sides of certain issues. And we expect to see a lot of this year. And that's why I mentioned the PMTA exemption bills. We would rather not see states move on these things. We want to see independent retailers able to stay open. It's still very dodgy. Ironically, people who are selling nicotine are sort of stuck in the trap that marijuana dispensaries are in, where the federal regulations are harsh or just straight up prohibition, and so there's kind of this cat and mouse game that goes on. There's a lot of retailers, a lot of manufacturers out there who are doing their best to kind of fly under the radar so that they can keep supporting their customers, which of course are people who stopped smoking. And we all want to see this category succeed. Tobacco companies have a financial stake in seeing this category succeed. And so it's not as bad as I think a lot of people are inclined to believe. as far as tobacco companies' role in all of this. And I'm not here to be an apologist. They have made because we are not a tobacco company apologist. If there is anything that we have said about tobacco companies, is that they should be paying for this. They should be paying for the solution. They should be funding organizations like CASAA. They should be funding trade organizations, and they need to help all of us to elevate their consumers' voices so that we can be included in policy discussions and in research, which is something that we're going to get into this year. I don't have anything completed to share with anybody, but this is a very serious part of the conversation going forward, not just including consumers in committee hearings, but in research design and how that research is discussed. And decisions that the regulator is making. We need more than public comment sessions with the regulator in order to share our experiences and what we need from the industry and from policymakers. And tobacco companies can and do support us in doing that. So I hope that, as a result of this, and hopefully this is a reference that people can come back to from time to time, we really, I think, need to refocus our energy on, sharing the truth far and wide, as we have been doing. I'm sure some people are rolling their eyes and sighing and saying, "Oh, we've been doing this." But it really is, I think, important to point out who the opposition to us actually is. And that is the organizations and people who claim to be working in defense of public health and claiming to be saving the children, when the reality is they're actually exposing all of us to more risk. So with that, we have definitely gone over the hour. Any closing thoughts or things? I know that I've kind of skipped over some of the granular details here. But I know that we've got a lot of links out there and people can check things out. So any other questions or things that we need to, and I see a question on the screen now.
We've got a question from Mowgli Vapes, who writes, if a U.S. tobacco company quits selling smokes and switches to 100% vape products, will that excuse them from paying their share of the MSA, which, for folks who don't know, is the Master Settlement Agreement?
So there's no Master Settlement Agreement for vapor products. The money that tobacco companies pay into the settlement, first of all, is based on market share, and it is based on sales of cigarettes. There's a separate MSA, I believe, for smokeless tobacco, but there's nothing for vapor. There's nothing for nicotine pouches, unless nicotine pouches fall under some sort of definition somewhere. But I think, not a lawyer, not legal advice. And if tobacco companies take legal advice from me, then we're in a lot worse situation than we imagined. But I do
please give all of them legal advice, Alex.
But I think you're correct. The answer to the question is no. I don't think if they switched completely to vapor that they would have to pay MSA.
Would that also affect CTP user fees and the money that the Center for Tobacco Products gets from that, which is, by the way, completely funded?
It's companies that are regulated by FDA are paying into the user fees. So
regardless of the product, it's
right. If you've gotten through the authorization process through CTP, you are subject to paying user fees.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
Before anybody else asks, I just wanted to throw that one in there because it's kind of.
Who was behind the ridiculous truth ads? The simple answer is the Truth Initiative. I don't know the company that they contracted with to do that, but they really do manage to put out some absolute garbage. I think if you did some digging around, and I forget, I've already forgotten that person's name. I'm sorry. I'm trying to find you here in the list. I saw that question earlier and I wanted to answer it. Anyway, the person who asked that question, who are behind the Truth Initiative ads, I'm not trying to be smart ass. It is the Truth Initiative, and they hire an ad agency to do these things. And I imagine that the pitch meetings are really just a bunch of people sitting around a table saying, "Ooh, this is clever," but there's no real science going into these campaigns. Other than, of course,
No.
the FDA did look at their real cost campaigns. I think this was back in 2018, and Kathleen Crosby, who is the director of communications at Center for Tobacco Products, got up in front of a room full of lawyers and said, "We did some research on our real cost campaign ads, the brain worms and stuff, and we determined that adults should not see these ads." Of course, there are plenty of adults who did see those ads, and it has continued to skew people's understanding of the risks associated with nicotine that doesn't involve smoking. So yeah, absolutely horrible stuff. And hopefully at some point, yeah, we can get that sort of
Here's another
PMI.
question we've got from Green Eyed Lady. Will PMI be paying MSA money for sales of IQOS?
So just for clarification, Philip Morris International does not do business in the United States. It is PMI USA. And I would think yes. Well, I actually, I'm not sure. So this is a definitional thing. I'll have to research this. How is a cigarette defined in the master settlement agreement? I just don't know off the top of my head. But I'm not sure if the modified risk order would exempt them from making those payments. And that is, of course, if PMI USA does end up marketing IQOS in the U.S. There's issues with the lawsuit. I'm not an expert on this, but as long as IQOS is manufactured in the United States, whoever ends up selling them can sell them. But right now, Altria cannot sell them because of the lawsuit with Reynolds. And it's all very complicated, and I can't say I thoroughly understand it. But if it is PMI USA, then we'll have to check the definitions. So
another one from Mowgli Vapes. So big tobacco companies aren't locked into MSA payments if they switch 100%. That sounds like a major incentive to quit selling smokes. Here.
Yeah, it could be. But one thing that people should understand is that declining cigarette sales, declining revenues, which I don't know that they've actually experienced. One of the things that actually helps tobacco companies out in terms of revenue is raising taxes. Go figure. Sure. It does seem like an incentive, but all of those payments have sort of been factored in to quarterly revenue, year over year stuff that I should know more about. I don't invest in tobacco companies, so I really don't watch a lot of that stuff, but I probably should, because there's a lot of useful information that comes out of quarterly earnings meetings. But all of that to say, for example, when there was when Juul was received the marketing denial order, the market reacted by selling out of Altria. Well, it was kind of ridiculous because Altria's calculations for the year actually didn't factor in Juul doing anything. And so Altria was not actually hurt. I mean, they have a 35% stake in Juul, but the MDO should not have hit them the way it shouldn't have hit their stock price like it did, because they didn't really count anything from Juul in terms of future revenue.
Sure.
So it was all sentiment driven. All of that to say, tobacco companies are aware of how much this costs, and doing away with master settlement agreement payments by switching to smoke-free or just switching to vapor may not be as big of an incentive as we imagine.
Right.
But the profit margin should be. Yeah. And of course, helping,
absolutely.
helping people.
Oh, I mean, that would be great, right? If that was priority number one for all of us. And then, I think that's we got another one here from Mr. Addy Tooney. CASAA, just wondering if the Aussie survey, the Australian survey, which is ending soon, will be mentioned. Yes, I was just going to mention that kind of on the wrap up.
Go for it.
Did you want to? Oh yeah.
No, go for it.
The
I think
therapeutic
this
good.
is as good a place as any to wrap things up because I am going way long. So let's do it.
Yeah. No, absolutely, Addy. It ends on the 16th. The Therapeutic Goods Administration is seeking public comment on potential reforms to the regulation of nicotine vaping products in Australia. The potential reforms are aimed at preventing children and adolescents from accessing products while supporting access to products of known composition and quality. There's a whole list of things here that Kristen sent me to say, but it just ends in a bunch of dots. So yes, here is the mention of it for everybody. It does end on the 16th. I will go ahead, or Kristen, can you go ahead and drop the link to that in chat? That would be fantastic. And I wanted to wrap this up with my favorite question that I've seen so far, which comes to us from Mallory Gates. Where are my brain worms? We all have them, Mallory. They're just imaginary and invisible, but we all most certainly have them.
And contagious.
Yeah, and contagious. My best advice for avoiding brain worms, just regularly, maybe once in a while, just wash your drip tips. There. I think everybody should just wash their drip tips. Wash your mouthpieces once in a blue moon.
Blow your nose. Wash your drip tips.
Yeah, wash your hands. I don't know.
Yeah.
Basic hygiene and stuff would be good. Probably a good idea for everybody. But that does seem like an excellent place to wrap things up. Thank you, Alex, for all of that. You did an excellent job, Ryan. That was a lot of information, and you, sir, did a fantastic job. Should I do the spiel? Do we still do spiels? I'm so out of practice here. I feel like it's been a lifetime since.
I'm going to make you do the spiel, but before that, I do want to thank Kristen for compiling a lot of this information, and a lot of it I didn't get to.
You, Kristen, yeah.
But special thanks for Kristen doing this work like 3 weeks ago before the break, before the weather events kind of had us taken off. So.
That was a lot of us not being around for a little bit was me and dealing with weather and stuff like that. So I apologize for that, everybody. But we are back in full force, in full swing for now, until I get buried under 7 feet of snow again. But yeah. Awesome. Yes. Thank you again, Kristen. And yes, there's a link there that Kristen just dropped from CASAA in chat. And as far as I'm aware, that this is just open, right? Like this is not limited to just Australians. This is kind of open as far as I know. I don't
have a better answer for you. I looked at it briefly.
Yeah,
and
to my knowledge, this is open to all the world.
Okay.
This
awesome.
is
I'm not going to say otherwise.
Planet Earth, you can comment. So, unless you're living on a satellite station or the moon or something, as far as I know, yes, this is available to everyone to comment on. So please do. That's it. I think that's it for the show. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Right, I guess the spiel. God, I don't even know the spiel anymore. CASAA. Head over to CASAA.org. If you're not a member yet, you're doing absolutely everything wrong. Please head over to CASAA.org, sign up, become a member today. It's absolutely free, and we promise not to flood you with emails, just the stuff you need to know when you need to know it and what you need to do about it. You can also, while you're over on our fantastic website, thank you, Danielle Jones, for all the work on CASAA's awesome website. You can check out merchandise, which we have plenty of. You get to be a walking billboard for tobacco harm reduction, so pick up some swag. If you haven't submitted a testimony yet, please do share your story. Our stories are just one of the most powerful things we have, and going forward, being more involved in research, in legislation, having our voices heard, those testimonies are that much more important. So if you haven't done that yet, please do that as well. If you are on the Book of Faces, the Facebook, I'm not. I can't stand the site. But if if you're there, if you have one, if you exist on Facebook, check out your state groups. We have all 50 states and everywhere else, territories and whatnot. So if you live in somewhere controlled by the United States, yeah, we have a state group for you. So check it out. Get involved there. It's a great place too for things that are really local and small. If you're hip to that, you catch wind of something that we haven't picked up on yet, please let us know. That's a great resource and tool just for the community at large. I think that's it. I don't know. Did I miss anything?
I think you nailed it.
You're nodding. Yet. What did I miss?
No, that was a no. You didn't miss anything. Yes, I think you nailed
Oh,
it.
okay. That was a no. You didn't miss anything. Okay, awesome. As far as I know, too, we will be back in 2 weeks' time from today for more discussion. Hopefully, maybe we'll have a little bit more info on some of the legislative things coming up soon. If not, maybe definitely soon. If not next week, more information on some of those things. So that is it. We are out of here. Thanks, everybody. Be excellent to each other. We will see you guys next time. Wow.